Hi, everybody who's watching our podcast, All Things Metaphysical. I'm Gail,
And I am Kelly.
and we honestly do not have anything in mind for today. So we're just going to see where we're kind of going to go and what's going to come up. Because we were talking about a difficult subject a couple days ago. So somehow I'm sure it's going to get weaved into where we go, but probably not the best idea to start there.
Probably not, although we could. And
And we could and end up on something else. So
um,
I guess I could start it in saying that, as we get closer to the end of the year and as we get closer to the holidays, I think you start to miss loved ones that have crossed over or who are really sick and you don't know if they're going to make it through the holidays. So we were talking about death and dying and how that's a conversation that not a lot of people are willing to talk about.
right.
Because I know
Well,
you
and
just
they're not.
what?
They really aren't. And we have people. Yeah, I've got a horrible echo because I'm on my laptop instead of a real computer this time. Um, but I don't know if it's just mostly in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I know people from other countries who don't seem to have as big an issue as we do in this country, talking about final plans.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people, the vast majority of people in the US are afraid to talk about several topics, not just end of life, but financial topics, religious. All of these things have been declared taboo subjects. And I think we have done ourselves a huge disservice by that. Um, you
Your
know,
laptop has some interesting issues today. So you're talking, but
Mhm.
your mouth isn't matching your words. So it's
Right.
really kind of interesting. And we do have a couple people who are watching us. So if you guys have questions or things you want us to talk about, please put them in the comments section and we will do our best to address them. And it is difficult. And I know that, I was a therapist for 30 years. And like even getting people to talk about those things in therapy was difficult. So,
Yeah. I don't exactly know why it is so hard,
mhm.
but it really does seem to be very difficult. Um, I like that topic.
Yeah,
Um, the what are your thoughts or the opinions on the Oregon pyramids? That's
I love Oregon pyramids. And I work with a guy in Croatia who turns my designs into Oregon necklaces, and I always have one on. Um, just because I like the energy of the Oregon and I like the energy of the crystals in it. And then balanced with my mandalas, they're kind of cool. But Oregon pyramids, I think, are really cool. I have a bunch of them. Plus, when you're traveling, as opposed to taking crystals, it's easier to just throw like an Oregon pyramid in the suitcase than a bunch of crystals that you have to wrap and protect. And to me, it's very similar energy. I have some little selenite ones to bring the vibration up to the light. And then I have a lot of like black tourmaline and black obsidian ones. What are your
yeah.
thoughts?
I haven't played with them too much. Um, I have a couple,
Uh-huh.
and probably because of the style of energy work that I do, it
Uh-huh.
is easier and more precise for me to choose an individual crystal.
Mhm.
So I haven't worked with them a whole lot because I'm used to working with individual crystals one at a time. But I can see where there would be an advantage. If you have complementary crystals, I can see where that would be an advantage. But I guess that's old school in me. That's the way I learned, and that's the way I've always done it. So as much as I hate to say it, I do it only because that's the way I've always done it. So maybe that's me not wanting to open up and do something new and improved.
It's really funny because I'm traveling this weekend and I haven't traveled in a long time. And so I made this crystal grid, which I was going to take with me to put in the hotel room because I don't do well in hotel rooms and in hotels. I mean, like I feel all the energy that's going on. It's really difficult for me. But then I ordered a bunch of orgone pyramids and I'm like, oh, it's going to be so much easier to just throw those into a suitcase then to wrap the crystal grid, to take it apart, to then put it back together. And so I'm going to try it. I'm going to see what happens. I'm not going to take the crystal grid. Well, I am taking 5 orgone pyramids, but we'll see what happens with that. And some essential oil sprays. Like one of my favorite combinations to clear space, because when I was a therapist, I used to have to clear my office all the time. Coconut and sage together, because sage clears and coconut protects. Plus, it smells so good together. And I mix it up and make my own spray.
That's what I do with hotel rooms.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to stay in a hotel room, I walk in and I use my spray, but I also do an energy lining
Mm-hmm.
of everything in the room. And that way I don't feel it. It sort of shields me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, hotel rooms are really tough for a lot of people, I think.
Mm-hmm. There used to be that meme that went around on Facebook that said, people who are sensitive, they had them in a hazmat suit, like walking into like a store or something. Sometimes I feel like, could I have one of those? It would be really helpful to block the energy from everybody else. Like I used to be okay in crowds when I was younger, and now I have the hardest time. It's like I'll purposely walk away or in a different direction, or I'm like, I'm not going near that person, or you just kind of get a feel for where you need to be and who you kind of need to avoid.
Right.
Yeah. The person who asked about our opinions on Oregon pyramids wants to know, how do the pyramids affect you?
I haven't really worked with mine a lot. It's a nice energy that I get from them, or I would not have kept them. They were given to me as a gift.
Uh-huh.
So I now that I think about it, I'm going to do my new moon thing tomorrow with those instead of regular crystals, just single crystals, and see how it works. How do they affect you? Can't talk.
Well, you're going to love my answer to this. Is most things that amp other people up calm me down. So they actually have more of a well, most of the ones I have too are some kind of black tourmaline, black obsidian. One has rose quartz in it, one has amethyst in it. So they usually ground me more than amp me up, which is unusual because there's all kinds of copper and other metals in them. So I just think it's really interesting. It's
Yeah.
like casinos, like the energy in casinos freak a lot of people out. I get calmer.
Well, I can't be in a casino. I just can't. It just doesn't. I can't. I have tried a couple of times,
Uh-huh.
and I have just never been a gambler, I guess. But I went into a casino when I was too young to go into one.
Hmm.
Older friends took me in with them, and I got in, and then I was like lost. I was like wandering around trying to figure out which direction I needed to go in. And after about 10 minutes, I was in the bathroom crying.
Mhm.
The energies were just too much, and I was young when dealing with that kind of stuff at that time, and it was not a good experience. The second time I went back, I was in my 30s, and it was easier for me to navigate,
Mhm.
but I still didn't like it. I
You
don't
know,
even like seeing shows there.
my parents, when they were alive, very much liked to gamble. So it's something that I kind of grew up. I mean, they didn't have gambling problems, but they liked to play slot machines and shoot craps and blackjack. So for my 21st birthday or around there, my dad took me to Las Vegas and I was playing blackjack at this table. It was a $2 blackjack table. And I was there for like 4 or 5 hours. And the guy goes to me finally, because I lost track of time. Because to me, it was fun with the intuition. Like, do you take a card? Do you not take a card?
Right,
Do you
right.
stand? What do you trust? How do you? So the guy goes to me finally, well, how much money have you lost? I'm like, what do you mean, how much money have I lost? I've been here for however long. I'm still playing on the same $20. He's like, how is that possible? And I left with the $20. So it was just really interesting. I think I've had, oh, big orb just flew by me. Um, I've always either won my money back at blackjack or like the last night I'm on a trip, I'll win my money back. So it's really hard for me. So, the question that we have is someone was just gifted with spikenard anointing oil. Do either of you use this?
No.
When I had a friend who was dying of cancer, I actually bought some and I created something for him with crystals, and some of the oil was in it, and some other things. So I have used it from time to time. My information that I got is, it was something that was used in like the times of Jesus and things like that to anoint and um, purify and heal. So that was my intention when I made that special project for my friend. So yes, I have used spikenard essential oil.
Usually, if I'm going to use an essential oil, I do rose a lot.
Mhm.
For some reason, I've always used cinnamon a lot. I have no idea why. My entire life, I have been given cinnamon essential oils repeatedly. So I use that. But I don't use a lot of oils unless I make them myself.
Mhm.
I just made this morning clove oil,
Mhm.
and I've done oregano oil and different medicinal
Mhm.
oils is primarily what I use oils for.
Awesome. I have a friend who also works with oils in a medicinal purpose. Her favorite is oregano oil to
Yeah,
drink a little
oregano
bit
is
of
great.
oregano oil.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't get
Yes.
past the smell.
Yeah,
The spikenard is from Jerusalem. So,
it's a Eastern plant.
yeah. So just interesting, Um, so for a lot of you who are watching, a lot of people know that yesterday was my birthday, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's like, "Do you have any idea how many people on the other side are lined up to wish you a happy birthday?" I'm like, "It's not bad enough that I got bombarded with energy all day from this side. I got bombarded with energy all day yesterday from the other side as well." And so I had a really weird day where I had a hard time reconciling all of it because there was so much energy coming at me, and I could feel people's wishes, and I could feel the sincerity in them and the authenticity in them. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do with all this. It's like at some point I was on overload.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
I get
have what?
I understand that one completely,
Yeah.
the overload. Um, that happens to a lot of people, and they don't understand what's happening to them. If
Hmm.
you have a lot of people on the other side, and all of a sudden around important days, if a wedding or a birthday or something similar, all this energy comes at you and it's like a roller coaster. And that's what it is usually. It's people on the other side trying to be part of your life.
And I didn't have a problem with it. I thanked them all for coming and waiting in line because it was like having a receiving line at a wedding. I mean, it was just like person after person after person, and I was very grateful. It's just, it was a lot of energy. I was very appreciative that they all came and they all waited to give me greetings. It's just, I guess I was so overwhelmed by like how many people on this side and the other side took time out to recognize it. That I think is why I might start crying while talking about that. That just overwhelmed me. Because sometimes, you know you're appreciated, you know that you're loved, but to feel it in that intensity was just interesting. What are you overloaded? Regrounding techniques. Yes, I practiced grounding most of the day yesterday. I was playing with crystals most of the day yesterday. My orgone pyramids that I ordered for my hotel room, which were the black obsidian ones, well, they came Monday, so I played with those yesterday too. And I have them all lined up, which is probably, and I have them all lined up across from where, because I work from home for my job now. I have them all sitting directly across from where I work. So as I'm going through my day with all the negativity that comes at me, I feel like that's doing a lot to clean it. So. So grounding yesterday, I made sure that my grounding cords were screwed into the earth. I made sure that the earth energy was coming up and holding me. I opened the earth chakra under my feet to try and keep me here. There's just a bunch of different things I did yesterday.
Yeah, we talked about grounding last week, and it's funny how that still relates. I mean, when I've been trying to ground a lot today because I am not very grounded today. I am very, very tired, and somebody decided to spray something around my house, and I inhaled it. But anyway, when you're grounding, I my tethers to grounding are sometimes a half mile long. And sometimes particularly when you're overwhelmed and you're feeling very not grounded,
Mhm.
you kind of need to reel that in a
Mhm.
little bit. And that's what I've been trying to do today. So it's important to pay attention to, even if you're grounded to the center of the earth, you may not be as grounded as you think you are.
Sometimes in order to shut down messages, like I've had to physically put one hand on my crown chakra and one hand on my third eye just to close the messages down for a while so that I can ground. Because other than that, sometimes I feel like my head is just this funnel where information just comes in all the time. You get
Yeah.
used to it. It's a weird feeling.
You do get used to it, but sometimes I've lately been getting so many messages from so many different directions that I have literally walked around like this.
Mhm.
It's like, I'm closed. No, really, guys, I am closed. And somebody late last night, I was just about to fall asleep, and I literally feel someone knocking on my head.
Mhm.
Hello? I'm like, no, go away.
Mhm.
And it was my aunt that just passed. So
Mm.
she was, you know, it had a dire need to let me know she was okay on the other side. And it was just weird because even when I try to be completely grounded, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to feel anything. They still come through.
Well, the interesting thing, and this is what happens to me when I'm completely grounded, then I start getting messages about everything that's going to happen on the earth
Yeah,
and with humanity. So it's like, which messages would I rather hear?
right.
So, like when I was traveling, I forgot what year it was, but it was the year of the shoe bomb in London. And I was traveling pretty much off the grid. I was in this remote area in the Boundary Waters, way up in Minnesota or Wisconsin. I was in one of them. And I remember when we turned off the concrete pavement and we turned onto a dirt road, I started seeing all the ley lines of the earth. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I saw my friend who was driving the car look like the Matrix with the green lines, like she completely disappeared. And so I was in this like alternate universe, and then they kept showing me London, and they kept showing me a problem, and all the ley lines converged to London, and then there was this huge blockage. And so we were in a remote area, no TV, no radio, no cell service, no nothing. And so, like a few days later, we were in town and we heard what happened. I'm like, oh, it all makes sense now, you know. But it was so interesting when you start to get messages like that. You don't know what to do with them because it's like, what's the big deal about London? I don't understand.
Right.
So, so much
Yeah.
for being connected to the earth.
Right. Right. You know, I had something similar happen right before 9/11. I owned a pet sitting company,
Hmm.
and I had literally hundreds of animals whose parents were overseas. And I woke up 3 hours before the first plane hit going, they're not going to be able to come home. I need to immediately hire more pet sitters. This
Hmm.
is going to go on for a while. And I start calling pet sitters, asking them to add hours. And they're like, why? I didn't know why. I just knew I needed them.
Hmm.
And then when we all found out, they were calling me going, whoa, how did you know that? It's not like I wanted to know. I promise you that.
Yeah, for a while I tried painting, so I bought all these acrylic paints, and I was driving home, I think it was the week before 9/11 happened, and there was this huge pink cloud that followed me home. And so I decided to try and paint it. Never painted before in my life. I'm like, so I painted it. It's actually in, I think, the first book I wrote. And I didn't think anything about it. It was on a huge canvas. And then it was at my parents' house. And like they pulled it out 6 months later and they said, you realize you painted the explosion before it happened. Because the
Wow.
bottom of
Yeah.
the picture was all blue like water. The top of the picture was all gray and stormy and like lightning bolts. And then there was this huge pink cloud. And for those of us, blessing, curse, I don't know, is when the planes hit, you saw the people be taken out of their bodies before the trauma of the plane hitting, and it was all pink. And that was the pink cloud that I painted. So it was just, really interesting when you look back on it. It's like, how did I know all that? Where did that come from? Why am I having
Right.
this intuition? But it was so important that I paint that picture. Like they didn't give me an option.
Right.
Just interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
So one of the questions that we have is how would you explain the appearance of orbs, which I have all the time flying over me, around one person and not around another? What do you feel is the attraction of their energetic appearance or non-appearing? Um, I haven't really thought much about it. I mean, they've once I started doing lives, it started on Instagram when I was using my phone and doing readings. People stopped listening to what I was saying and everyone watched the orb show that was going on around me. And so it's just kind of continued. And now, no matter what electronic device I'm using my big desktop computer now or my cell phone. They're always around. And at the beginning of when we were talking, there were some that, if people want to rewatch
Yeah.
this, you'll see them fly by. I think it's just spirit wanting us to know that they're around and that they're present, and it's not a different dimension. It's all part of the same. It's just we're now being able to start to see them. I think it's always been there. I think I always remember the pictures that posted when Barack Obama got his inauguration or a big party in Chicago. When you see those pictures, there was orbs everywhere in all the pictures. And that was like when they really started to go mainstream. It's like, well, what is this? And then there's always the theories that it's dust or this or that. And it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
dust usually doesn't move in spirals and whiz by. So
Change direction. Yeah. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on why orbs appear to some people and not others?
I think they probably do appear around everyone.
Mhm.
We just can't see them. Either it's an entity, a departed loved one. I had somebody's dog fly by one time. when I was doing a reading. I'm like, oh wow, a white poodle just went by. And I think it depends more on the energy of the ones trying to create the orbs.
Hmm.
Um, I get orbs in different colors.
Hmm.
A lot of orbs come through and they're sort of white or yellowish white. I get purple ones, red ones, green ones, and it depends on what's going on with the earth, the energies around. It's somebody told me one time they could tell when the Schumann resonance was off
Hmm.
because the orbs didn't come through as frequently.
Hmm.
I think there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I think they're always there.
Hmm.
We just may not be able to see them.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just really interesting. So if you ever watch back any of the podcasts we did, you'll see them all around my head
Yeah,
and whizzing by. So it's just an interesting thing.
it
Um,
is. And I think it's just one of those energy things that not everyone sees, but more and more and more people are starting to see them. Have you seen the zigzags?
the thing when I take pictures, or like when I would take pictures sort of the sun, I would get Metatron's purple light. And I
Yeah.
used to find it fascinating. And I used to love to take those pictures or those videos. And in one I took, the sun actually turned square. So it's just been really interesting. Those kinds of things have always shown up in all my pictures my whole life. It's not new for me. I think it's been a comforting thing. Like I call them Orbeez. I just think it's fun, and it allows that childhood part of myself to come out where it's just playful and things like that. However, if I see a like unicorn orb running around, I will freak out. I'm just letting you know. I've never seen one yet, but there'll probably be one that shows up at some point. Um, I just think it's fascinating.
It is. Yeah.
So, do you have opinions on why certain spirits will show up in photos for some people and not others, especially in cemeteries?
I think it's kind of the same thing.
Hmm.
I also think it depends on the people. If you get a group of people and they are ready to see, they'll see. And
Hmm.
if you get a group of people where two or three of them are ready, but two or three are not, you probably none of them will see anything. I've done a lot of paranormal investigating, and
Hmm.
that seems to be the way it works. You have, if you're afraid, they don't want to terrorize you unless you find a really dark spirit,
Hmm.
really dark entity, and that's a whole other thing. But if we're talking about just people who have crossed over, they don't want to scare you.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. How do you know the difference between a dark entity and a light entity?
Believe me, you know. It doesn't take long. I have gone out into cemeteries
Uh-huh.
with people who were complete skeptics, did not believe anything. After the third time we saw the red eyes and heard the growl, they were a believer and they were the first ones back in the car. And it was hilarious to me because this whole time, it's your imagination, it's your imagination. Wait, what was that? Gone. And it just cracks me up to take skeptics out into a cemetery.
Hmm.
But having departed loved ones show up in pictures, I think is probably more common.
Hmm.
I have a picture of my grandmother holding one of my nieces, but my grandmother died a month before she was born. And you look at the picture, it is absolutely my grandmother's arms and her hands wearing her ring, holding that baby.
Hmm.
And we've passed that around the family, and nobody, well, in my family, nobody cares. But, even outside of the family, people, it must have been a double exposure. It was taken with a digital camera. There's not a whole lot of room for overlapping there. But
It's just interesting.
it is interesting. It's very interesting.
And I know that like when aura photography first became popular, everyone wanted to have their aura picture taken and
Yeah.
things like that. And it's nice that the world is finally opening up to some of these things.
Yeah.
I always think about the Star Trek movie, the one where they had to go back to save the whales, to
Yep.
save humanity. I don't know, this one always goes through my head at different times, and one of their crew member, I think they were in the 21st century, and one of their crew members was
Yep.
sick, and they're like, "They're gonna cut his head open and do, like, brain what is
Check
wrong
off.
with them?
Yeah.
Are they barbaric?"
Yeah.
You know? There's
Or the
so
woman, he gave her a pill and she grew another kidney.
Uh-huh. There's so much that we don't know yet and we don't understand, partly because of our limited thought process and, what our imaginations stop us from creating. Because there are people who get all these ideas to do all this stuff, but then it's like, no, that can't happen. No, that's not going to work and things like that. I know that when I first had my opening, I don't know what else to call it, in 2000 when everything came back. I got all this scientific information. That was what came through first, which was fascinating to me because my highest level of science was Bio 1. But never had chemistry, never had physics, never had anything else. But they gave me all this information about what kinds of medical tools we needed to develop and what genetic disorders are really caused from and where they're held in the DNA patterns and in the genetics. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this information? It's not like I know a whole team of scientists that I can go, hey, this is what you need to develop. This is what's going to move humanity in a very different direction. And then I remember, because like I said, I never had anything higher than Bio 1. So I said to the teacher, I'm like, I keep seeing all these shapes, and there's these gray tubes with purple balls on the end, and they keep forming all these different patterns. And then where the genetic problems are, this is exactly where the tear is in the tube. And then this is what you need to do to fix it. And my teacher's like, um, you're seeing double, you're seeing double helix DNA. Go back, meditate, and get more information. And I'm like, okay, because I didn't know any better. So I went back and meditated. I'm like, well, now they're moving this way, and now they're moving this way. And depending on people's health, the DNA changes color depending on what we need and where it's moving to, and which strands of the DNA are active and which strands aren't, and that we have a lot more strands than they think we have. And so it's just real. I mean, that was like 20 years ago now, and I still don't know what to do with all that information.
No, but I can guarantee you that what they call junk DNA is not junk.
Yeah. The thing that, and I'm going to geek out on like therapy stuff for a minute. The thing that I always found the most interesting as a therapist was people who had, now it's called DID, de-individualized identity disorder. It used to be called multiple personality
Yep.
disorder. But why could one personality be diabetic and then when they switched into a different personality, that personality wasn't diabetic? How did they change their entire body chemistry? What part of their brain are they using that the rest of us aren't? And I always thought that that was so cool, like because they did research on it, and like different personalities would go in and have blood tests and have different medical problems.
That shows you how strong our brain really is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know much at all about our own capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
But I was part of a medical team that had been hired to work on this one particular kid. And all of us were experts in our own fields. And when we came together in the hospital, um, I am still not certain what I saw, but that child was 6 inches off the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it. We all saw it. A nurse came in, saw it, and screamed and ran. And I really think it was us sending him energy, but it was his decision to accept it and run with it. And when he got better, he would say, anytime he started feeling bad, he would just pull out the parts that were hurting and fix them and then put them back in. And he never did anything like that before that event. But, he's in his 20s now and perfectly healthy. And to this day, he does that. And he will talk about it. He's actually done speaking engagements on it, where his brain, he remembers making the decision.
Mhm.
I'm going to take this energy and I'm going to fix what's wrong with me. I'm going to use it. And he was 8 years old.
Mhm.
What 8-year-old kid do you know that's sick that's going to say, I accept all of this great energy and I'm going to let it fix me? And that is just fascinating to me. And he's been studied and studied and studied. And they all come up with, he decided he was going to use that to be well.
Mhm.
And he was.
What is your take or experience on like psychic surgeries? Because I think it's a similar vein of what we're talking about. It's not exactly the same thing.
It's not exactly the same thing, but like most other treatments, if you believe and accept that it will heal you, it will heal you.
Mhm.
Um, I've I've led a very varied life,
Mhm.
and I spent some time in the Bayou area of Louisiana,
Mhm.
East Texas, Louisiana, and it's known for two things: the swamp monster of Boggy Creek and voodoo.
Mhm.
And I was allowed. They usually don't let outsiders watch their rituals, but I was allowed to watch one. And I went in there thinking I'm going to have triple protection. I'm going to call in my angels. They're dark, they're evil, it's satanic, and it wasn't. It was a healing ritual for
Mhm.
an older member of their, I guess, congregation, their group, and that I learned a really valuable thing. It can be used for bad, it can be used for good. Like most other religions, it can be very, very horrible and traumatic, or it can be very, very beautiful and good. And seeing that particular ritual just opened me up more than I was already open, because this was a very profound healing circle. It was an amazing ritual that they did. And people would ask me, well, how many? There were no snakes. There was no bloodshed. There was no sacrifices. There were no chickens hanging from ropes.
Mhm.
It was just a nice healing circle. And that woman had had a brain tumor, and they told her it was inoperable. Doctors told her it was inoperable. And after that ritual, she went to the doctor and it was half the size that it was before.
They're showing me, while you're talking, they're showing me how much is lost from shamanic cultures.
Mhm.
And what we're talking about would have been practiced a lot by indigenous people and still is. It reminds me of the story, which I think I shared on here towards the beginning, that I had a friend who had a brain tumor, and there was 5 of us, and so we put her in the middle of the room, and the rest of us all knew how to open the Akashic records. So we opened the Akashic records to do a healing. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want it to be me. I don't want it to be me. I don't want it to be me. Surely someone else is going to get called to do this. It is not going to be me. Sure enough, I'm sitting there and I hear come out of my mouth, may I approach your head? I talk like that. And then, and I talked about this. They dropped my body temperature like 30 degrees. They froze the tumor. And then it took like 3, 4 hours to get my body temperature back up to normal.
Right,
And then she went, and it was like they couldn't really find it, but they still did radiation. I mean, it was gone, but they
right.
still did the radiation and everything else. But like they couldn't explain it. But I mean, I felt it go. I mean, I felt it freeze and I felt it go and I felt them take it out. And, so it's really interesting. It's not something I talk about, that aspect of having had experience with all those things. Um, but when I was in my opening to intuition classes and stuff, the teacher was teaching it had just come back from the casa in Brazil, and so they were doing all kinds of healing stuff. And this was my second night. Did I tell this story? This was my second night in class, and I get called in first for the healing because they're like, you're the most skeptical, because I hadn't bought into everything yet. Everything was
Right.
starting to come back. And so they did the healing on me. I'm like, okay, whatever. And they're like, go back out and meditate. I'm like, okay, fine. And so, sure enough, we're getting towards the end of it. I don't know how long I was meditating for. I was completely out in the universe somewhere. I could feel a tap on my shoulder, and the teacher's like, "You need to come back in here." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Just come back in here." And so I follow her back in, and she goes to me, "Okay." Lauren, who was her assistant at the time, was laying down on the table. She's like, "She needs a healing. Do it." I'm like, "What? Are you out of your mind, lady? This is my second night in class. I am not doing a healing." Of course, she's no one would take no for an answer, and
Right.
the person on the table is like, "I give you permission," and my teacher's like, "Just do it," and I'm like, "Okay." So I just moved my hands to different places and felt a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't explain, and it was just really interesting.
Yeah, it's the first time you actually step into doing a healing is just the most profound thing. And I was quite young and it happened accidentally to me.
Mhm,
I was the only person who
mhm,
could help this person. And I just did. And the energy that flew through me, and I was not moving my hands, something else was moving my hands.
mhm.
And it when it was all over, I just sat down on the ground and what in the world what just happened to me? But I've heard many other similar stories.
Mhm.
The first time, it's you have to step into that trust.
I then was afraid to touch people. Like, I wouldn't do a healing, I would never put my hands on someone's body because there's so much, like, white light shooting out of my hands and rainbow
Mhm.
energy. I'm like, "Can't you guys see this? I mean, it's as clear as day," but no one else ever saw it. So for a while, I thought I would just was like, "What's wrong with me? Why is this happening?"
Yep,
But, mm,
yep. And I had a church that said that was satanic, and I'm like, "Yeah, really?" Even as a child, I was like, "Really?"
well, now everyone knows the word Reiki. Like, at
Right.
that time, that wasn't around yet, that wasn't popular, it hadn't, people talk about energy and all the time now in mainstream. 20 years ago, that wasn't happening.
Nope. When I first became a Reiki master, I was very proud of myself because it's a lot of work.
Mhm,
It's not just one weekend course and you're done. This
mhm,
took years working with different teachers.
mhm,
Nowadays, they do it in a weekend, and I'm like, that can't work. but, but no one knew why I was so proud of having accomplished this
mhm.
because they had no idea. What are you, a priest now? It's not a religion, you know. So I'm happy to see that it's more mainstream now.
Yeah. So it's just interesting, and I think it's also about, and then we can start to kind of wrap it up a little bit. I think it's about learning to be authentic and genuine and trust, even if you don't understand why you have some of the gifts or what you're fully capable of, but
Right,
just trusting that the universe, God, source, goddess, whatever
right,
your belief system is, there is an order to things and there are reasons that things happen. We just don't always understand them.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our ever evolving, system of whatever you want to call it, whether it's spirituality or energetically or whatever it is. We are waking up, more and more and more people are waking up and they're starting to subconsciously understand things. This young generation just blows my mind. I have a 7-year-old grandson who understands Reiki.
Mhm.
And, someone asked him why he always wore red shoes. And he said, it helps me to be grounded and connected to the center of earth. I didn't teach him that. My
Mhm.
daughter didn't teach him that. He came to this planet knowing that.
Mhm.
And that is just incredible to me.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So it sounds like we've covered a lot yet again in today's episode. So any questions come up around anything that we've talked about that you want to know further, email us, put comments on YouTube, or put comments in the From Fear to Freedom page, and we will get back to you with the answers.
Yep.
So, all right, everybody, have a great night, and we'll see you guys all again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.